Contempt is a small Roblox experience made by user @Contemptional just last year. While normally the term experience would simply prevent legal issues concerning games within games, in this situation it feels very appropriate. The genre is denoted as horror, but upon opening it, you won't be greeted by any jump scares or scary monsters. Instead, the player spawns on a seemingly infinite plane. A grey, cloudy sky covers the world, and below is water, colored red. One of the first things to feel off are the other players, specifically because there are none, yet you'll see many people running around. Without any sense of direction or goal, they randomly walk while continuously babbling, saying either singular words, cryptic phrases, or complete nonsense. They are also all either a default male or female avatar. The only notable landmark in this otherwise empty world is a statue and two pillars, one broken. Near them is a TV, tape, pile of paper, and a chair. So, what the heck is this? Well, it's rather simple. You're told it before even opening it. He visits as one of many, or multiple, at the memory of her. It tells the story of an uneven relationship, whether platonic or romantic, which no longer exists. Instead, the nebulous she now holds contempt for him, while he is left to wander the memories he has of her. Let's unpack the evidence. The seemingly vague phrases end up revealing quite a bit when all seen together. Here they all are. The singular words obviously cannot tell a story, but they mostly relate to the themes outlined earlier: petty, distance, decide, complexion, and capability. Specifically, complexion is one referenced later as well. The cryptic phrases support the thesis more. The phrases referring to him all seem to focus on him being untrustworthy and two-faced. He is who you can and cannot trust. He is one and many. We are many and one. All of these imply that at some point in the past he may have betrayed her or done something which made her believe he was acting almost as if there were several versions of him. A pleasant, trustworthy one which she initially got to know, and one who caused the relationship to fall apart. The gibberish is simply a Caesar cipher. The code phrase used to decipher it is, "Will Mb ever forgive me?" As the Mb is an obvious stand-in for she, the movement of letters is revealed, and the other phrases can be found. Scully turns into Diane, and the Kif becomes "Till death do we part." The former gives a name to the she, while the latter is an interesting subversion on the normal phrase "Till death do us part." Rather than being together right now, with only death being able to tear them apart, he hopes that it will be death that will reunite them, and maybe they'll have a chance together in the afterlife. A few of the phrases also have vague references towards the past. These include "the water hasn't always been red" and "admiration was then." The admiration refers to Diane's admiration of the he, as he clearly still waits at the memory of her until death will reunite them. His admiration continues into the present. The water, meanwhile, is a symbol of their relationship. It used to be clear and enjoyable, but at some point it turned red, being contaminated by the metaphorical bad blood between them. The way the sentence is phrased helps to add to the unease and unchanging feeling of this place. While it hasn't always been red, it may certainly feel like it, and they must keep telling themselves this in order to not forget it. The idea of truth is also one that is repeated. In a relationship in which truth seemed to be obscured, of course it would be of interest. These phrases are "below uncovers truth" and "defiance isn't always truth." The former likely indicates the metaphorical below of a deeper character, initially hidden under the main character's facade. The defiance is even more vague. However, it could be a reference towards how he defied social rules of honesty by pretending to be someone he was not. These ideas, uncovered by the phrases, are something that is supported when looking at the landmarks. The most obvious landmark is the large statue towering over everything else. It is reasonable to assume that it is symbolic of Diane, as the statue leans towards feminine shape, and this is supposed to be at the memory of her, after all. Some flowers are placed up high next to her as if she were dead, which she just as well could be, based on the ties she cut. The statue is also placed on a pedestal, which creates three effects. For one, it shows him literally putting her on a pedestal, a phrase used to mean that he elevates her above flaws, idealizing her. The fact she is up so high also makes her out of reach, as he can no longer return to her, even if he tries. Lastly, this obscures her. It is impossible for a player to get an accurate perception of her, as the memory of her cannot be accurate through his warped perception. When getting closer to the statue, a buzzing noise may also be heard. It gives no more information, instead is just an unending sound. Well, this was likely added to make the statue feel creepier. In a way, it also signifies the permanent persistence of this place. The tone doesn't vary, much like how all else stays consistent. It is something, though, something the he wants to cling to, encouraging him to stay at the statue. But a more interesting part of the statue is the note at the back. This is what helps to support one of the analyses earlier. Upon inspection, it reads, "Complexion defies, nor mercy. Beyond." Complexion can be a term for face, so this note refers back to his betrayal. He defied her by not giving her his true self. However, now she will not grant him mercy for her betrayal. They are beyond that point. The remaining environment is all rather simple and consistent in its messaging. The cloudy skies and unending plains show the constant dreariness of this existence. The television and tape imply that he is watching something, likely connected to Diane. He cannot move forward, go on to new content, with only a tape to rewind. The two pillars could be seen as a symbol for him and Diane. While one is ready to continue holding up the relationship, the other has broken down and won't help carry that weight. Finally, the stack of papers would be relatively inconsequential, were it not for the fact that, when looking closely, they are titled "A Proof of the Riemann Hypothesis." The Riemann hypothesis is a famously unsolved problem in mathematics. Its details won't concern us here, but its effect is in two parts. For one, it gives another feeling of unreality, but more importantly, it also reinforces its central message. Even though he tries to stay at the memory of her and solve their relationship, it won't work. It's an unsolvable problem. And then there's one last thing. The people actually running around. It's mostly male avatars by the name of Weigheck, and one female avatar by the name of Moon Stefani. Let's focus on the latter first. Initially, she sits on the chair in the middle, as if she were also to be part of the scenery, though upon approaching, gets up and starts running around and saying all the same phrases as Weigheck. As another symbol of Diane, she acts as a foil to the statue, being an overly realistic portrayal of her. She is also just a person. However, this long time spent at the memory of her caused her to break and not only be another person, but be exactly like Weigheck, spouting the same nonsense and running around aimlessly. She has lost her individuality, leaving the only proper representation of Diane as the statue towering above everyone. Obviously, Weigheck is another Caesar cipher, though using it like we did before also only results in gibberish. However, reversing it gives us the phrase, "say bye-bye." There is no doubt that this is supposed to show how the most important message is one he is unwilling to accept, thus encoding it differently to the rest. He needs to say bye-bye. He needs to leave this place, but he can't. Too infatuated with Diane, he is left to wander this place forever, unable to ever do anything but stay at the memory of her. The sky will stay grey, the water will stay red, and the only choice will be which of the repeating phrases he will say to himself, trying to justify his stay and process this failed relationship. Except, here's the thing. This entire last part was a lie. Or not quite a lie, but rather a giant misinterpretation. When doing my initial research, these were the conclusions I'd reached. It had been months since recording the random word generator selects the Roblox games we play video, and I'd forgotten about that playthrough. So when starting up the game a third time to verify my claims, I was surprised by the fact it wasn't Wagheck and Moon Stefani to greet me. Instead, it was two other randomly chosen default Roblox users. No one was sitting on the chair. It was solely a coincidence the first time, and this time there were more female than male avatars. Wagheck wasn't reversing the Caesar cipher. It was just a random Roblox user account created years before this game. I had gotten lucky. And where this analysis ends, the issue with interpreting amateur art begins. Now, I don't mean to call this game bad. It is certainly way above most Roblox games I've played, and it definitely had the most potential for analysis of any Roblox experience I've seen. But I cannot ignore the fact that, at the end of the day, it is a rather simple game, and it is impossible to tell what is a creative choice and what is the result of an artist that has not yet mastered their craft. The word defiance is misspelled in one of the phrases. Were this to be part of a published poetry book, I'd, depending on the reputation of the poet and the context, assume it is an intentional misspelling meant to defy grammatical conventions themselves. But in this case, it's more likely it was just an oversight. I could attempt to analyze the fact that there are always different users, but real users running around as a comment on how this is a reflection of all of our inner psyches, or how the people engaging in this memory end up becoming interchangeable. But then, why are they referring specifically to Diane? Isn't this just the result of a technical limitation the creator was unable to fix? Earlier I mentioned the use of a proof of the Riemann hypothesis as a way of communicating that this communicative stalemate is also an unsolvable problem, and that the idea of a solution exists solely in this detached limbo, but the blurriness of the text makes me suspect that it may just have been an asset taken from Roblox Studio, and the game maker only wanted to add in a stack of papers. The water stays still. I could have easily claimed that this is intentional to add to the eeriness of the unresponsive physics, or the fact that this is a stationary place where no change is possible, but I don't think that's the case. Realistic water physics were probably just way out of the range of this person's abilities or efforts. I tried to reach out to the creator for an interview, but unfortunately they never accepted my friend request, so I could message them, and I have no clue how to contact them in any other way. This leaves me in a strange situation. On one hand, I want to analyze beginners' art. They have a right, just like everyone else, to have their voice be heard and deconstructed. Hearing how they are being perceived can also allow them to better their craft and refine the tools they use. Yet, I'm stuck in a place where I fear overinterpretation, reading into things that weren't supposed to be there or only exist because the person didn't know how to go without them. One time during English class, I analyzed a poem, In February, by Alice Petway. It's on screen now if you'd like to read it. In summary, it uses the symbol of a moth dying on a road to show the insignificance of human death, and the very last line calls it a death. I proceeded to analyze the use of the word as a way of communicating the downplaying of death, and the way each one is just another. Knowing that this poem was written and rewritten several times, and that Petway's personal style includes trying to communicate great ideas in as few words as possible, I do believe that the use of the word was intentional here, as the literal sentence could have worked without it. However, this doesn't mean I ever think to analyze the use of the word in this game, or really any other Roblox experience for that matter. My expectations for them will never be the same as for published poetry, unless I'd see that every aspect of this game is equally as detail-oriented. I would just assume they wrote the sentence that way because they believed it sounded nice. It can be difficult to identify a purposefully naked birch in winter. But then again, does it matter? Now, this debate is quite long-running with the idea of death of the author, and whether an author's intention is relevant when analyzing a work, and I am way underqualified to significantly weigh in, but I do feel it worth mentioning here. I don't know whether the buzzing sound was intended to keep the player at the statue, but it did that for me. When I went through this, I ended up having certain ideas, certain experiences that caused me to have a specific interpretation of the work. And yes, parts of it were definitely attended by the author, such as the Caesar cipher. But in my initial playthrough, that mattered way less to me than other aspects of the scene setting. Those were what made me feel uncomfortable, and like this environment was not something one should be in. Even though I did not know the story back then, it caused a reaction which aligned with the moral. And shouldn't we focus on what is there for us to see, not some hypothetical things that might have been? That is a genuine question. I cannot tell you what your takeaway from this video should be, especially since, on a meta level, that would be me imposing my authorial intentions on your experience of this video. So, consider the points I made. Play the game yourself and come to your own conclusions. Comment to say I'm stupid, overanalyzing, and make that overused joke about the blue curtains. Or just replay the video, exit out in 9 minutes and 40 seconds, and feel content with the idea that it was only Weigheck and Moon Stefani populating Contempt. And with that, I feel it's time to say bye-bye, before I forever stay at the memory of this experience.